We have the pleasure of welcoming Frida Polli today to our interview series. I'm Aishwarya Jain from the peopleHum team. Before we begin, just a quick intro of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work with AI and automation technologies. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest, Frida is the CEO and founder of Pymetrics, a talent matching platform that leverages behavioral science and AI technology to help organizations build high-performing teams. Doing her part of making the world a better place, unbiased selections using tech is what Frida believes in. She has been recognized as one of the topmost HR influencers and entrepreneurs by a multitude of global organizations, an ambitious professional who is a role model for many young girls worldwide. She's also a committed mother of 3 and 4 if you want to include Pymetrics. We are extremely happy to have her on our interview series. Welcome, Frida. We're thrilled to have you.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for that kind introduction.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for making the time. So, Frida, I wanted to know, now I'm sure Pymetrics is something, you've given a lot of introductions, but I just love the way you put it, it's democratizing career search and right? And neuroscience and AI is kind of the framework of the entire concept. So how did you, come up with this, and what exactly is your vision for the organization?
How did this crazy idea come to be? Absolutely happy to answer that question. So I was a cognitive neuroscientist for about 10 years at Harvard and MIT. I really loved the research we were doing. Just became more interested in how can we apply this science to a big problem. Didn't exactly know how that was going to happen, but went to business school, and it was there that I saw recruiting firsthand for 2 years, because that's what MBA students do. And it was at that point that really the light bulb went off, because here were all these people, very talented, trying to find their next thing in life. And the tools that they were being given were very rudimentary, and the tools companies were using were very rudimentary. We were still relying on resumes and coffee chats and company presentations. And to my mind, there were like 3 things that were missing that our science could help with. So one was trying to understand something far more fundamental about people than sort of like the factoids that are on your resume. So like your personality, your cognitive style, your social aptitude. So that was one big piece that I thought was missing. And that's something that cognitive neuroscience or behavioral science can help with. The second piece was any kind of analytics. So, we can basically use machine learning or artificial intelligence to understand the aptitudes that make someone successful in a particular role at a particular company. And then with that machine learning model, we can find anyone, anywhere that has those aptitudes. So the ability to cast a much wider net and really democratize access to any opportunity is huge. And the third thing is that no one was treating this as an optimization problem. It was very analog. It was like, I'm going to submit the same thing over and over and over again to to different companies, and eventually someone will give me a shot. But why not help both companies and job seekers with an optimization problem of like connecting them immediately to their best fit opportunities rather than having it take, so much time and repetition. So those were like the 3 things that really struck me that we could help with. And then, personally, I was also going through a career search. I was, a former scientist. I wanted to be a tech entrepreneur. I was at the time, a single mom in my 30s. I didn't look like the traditional tech, entrepreneur who was, male in his 20s, like didn't have any kids. So I definitely was struggling with this myself. And also, I think one thing that we underestimate in sort of the career search matching process is how much a person's self-perception can influence what they choose to apply to, right? I mean, why do more women not choose entrepreneurship or choose other careers where they're underrepresented? Definitely it's partly because they think they might have a negative experience because of everything they read, but it's also just because they don't see people like them in those careers. And so I think that trying to alter through technology somebody's perception of, yes, I actually could be great at this job, I have all of the aptitudes, I have the right mindset, and encouraging them to apply to roles or fields that they're underrepresented is a huge aspect of what this technology can be helpful with. So that's how Pymetrics came to be, and it's an exciting future that we're building.
That's a beautiful vision that you have, and I'm pretty sure you're inspiring a lot of women out there, you know, because you're just breaking all the orthodox notions and all the traditional notions. And
Thanks.
that's wonderful. And you know, you are clearly a believer in AI being of great help. So,
Definitely.
your opinion on having a balance between, you know, human intelligence, human experience, research experience versus artificial intelligence for talent acquisition?
Sure. Well, look, I mean, I'm a human, in case in case you didn't realize that. And I think human beings are amazing. I think they are so talented, so creative, so wonderful in every single way. I'm a huge believer in like the positive aspects of humanity. However, I'm also a cognitive neuroscientist, and I can tell you that unfortunately, removing bias from a human brain is impossible. Like it's not hard, it's actually just impossible, right? And the other problem is that if you ask the average person, do you think you're more or less biased than the average person? 80% of people think they are less biased than most people. So obviously people's perception of their bias is very poor, right? Everybody thinks I'm not that biased, it's fine. But the data are very clear that no matter how good a person you are, what a kind heart you have, all of the rest of it, no matter how much good intention you have, you are biased. I'm biased, you're biased, okay? And so that is where I think artificial intelligence can be helpful, because unlike a human brain, with artificial intelligence, you can crack it open, you can say, okay, this is what's causing the bias, and you can take it out. That's just not possible to do with, you know, this thing called the brain. And so therefore, I'm not recommending that we remove humans or we, you know, dehumanize the process or anything. I'm saying that we use artificial intelligence as a method to reduce, mitigate bias in workforce decisions, because again, I don't think we need another research study to tell us that the workforce is not diverse as it should be. It's you know, got too many Caucasians, it has too many men. I mean, we don't need another study to prove that. You just need to look around, right? And so, but again, goodwill on the part of humans alone is not going to get us there. We need to leverage technology. And again, does it mean removing humans? It means helping humans have the tools to let them know when they're making a biased decision and how to improve upon that decision.
Absolutely, completely support that, and I understand your perspective. We need to leverage AI technology to help.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, I think that where the skepticism comes in, right, because there's a lot of skepticism around AI being able to be unbiased. There's a couple things, I think. One is that there are many examples of AI being biased, right? So let's just acknowledge that that is often the case, and that is a huge problem. I'm not denying that at all. I'm saying we should be aware of that. And that is a huge problem. And in those cases, the difference between an AI platform that is mitigating bias and one that is perpetuating it is the design. You know, AI is like anything else. If you design it to operate in a certain fashion, it will operate in that fashion. And so the AI systems that have been designed that have bias, the problem is they are just mirroring human behavior. They are just learning from humans with no guardrails in place, right? People are just using machine learning, saying match that human recruiter decision or match that workforce decision without either caring or realizing that that decision-making process is biased. And therefore, then you get all these terrible examples of, you know, resume parsers that are, you know, preferring men or whatever the case may be, right? That is a big problem. We need to mitigate against that problem. And actually, Pymetrics has taken the stance that we need more guardrails. We need actually some policy changes. We need some legislative initiatives to try to fix some of this stuff. So we are 100% on the bandwagon of AI is a wonderful thing, so long as there are safeguards in place. The only difference I would say is that the difference with the biased algorithm, which exists, and the biased human, again, is that you can fix the algorithm if you want to. And again, if you want to, you have to want to, you can go in, see what's biased about the algorithm and remove, reduce it and then you can test the algorithm. That's the other thing, is that, you know, it's very hard to test a decision-making process done by a human because you can't get into that, you know, the black box of the human brain. Versus with an AI, you can get in there, you can tweak, you can change whatever variables it's looking at, and then you can test and iterate until you can prove in a statistical way that the algorithm is not biased. So I just wanted to make that clear, because I think a lot of times there's skepticism, and it's you know, I understand where it's coming from. However, I think sometimes that skepticism is taken too far. I mean, I've heard many times, oh, there's no way you can remove bias from an algorithm. Well, that's just not true. I mean, that's a false statement, right? And I think people that are making those statements are prejudicing people against technology that can be incredibly powerful in terms of reducing our own human biases. And again, when we deploy biometrics, we see in a very clear fashion the reduction of bias, the increase in diversity, right? So for anyone that says, oh, it's not possible, I would say, well, okay, come look at our system, come look at the examples that I can show you, because then tell me it's not possible, because I know it's possible. So I think we have to mitigate against this sort of knee-jerk skepticism that just because a lot of tools are not checking their AI for bias doesn't mean that it's not possible. It is 100% possible.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, very important, because a lot of people are not aware of this at all, and they're non-technical.
Yep.
That's why they have this, right? And then when you think of machine learning algorithms, you need a lot of data to actually get these algorithms out. And and say that you're kind of mimicking human behavior, then there is a tendency to think that, oh, there would be some bias into it. That's not right.
Well, again, I mean, it is right. I mean, if you don't do anything, so let me just back up, because I think they're absolutely correct in thinking if I do nothing to my algorithm, it is going to be as biased as human beings. That is 100% true. Like, I should have started with that. So that is definitely true. I think, and that is a huge problem, right? But again, it's not the algorithm per se that's the problem in the end of the day. It's like I always say, if you don't like what an algorithm is doing, you won't like what the humans are doing, because the algorithm just learned from the humans, right? So let's just be aware of where the original sin is coming from. So again, I think people should be skeptical. They should, but again, hopefully, at least, in this day and age, anyone that is producing an AI system is at least aware of the fact that it could well be biased if it hasn't been tested, and hopefully is doing something about the bias. The thing that I think is most problematic now is that it's all put on it's a self-monitored system, meaning I, as a technologist, am saying, oh yes, I know I could have a problem. I'm going to look for that problem and I'm going to fix it. There are no external guardrails. So if I'm not a well-intentioned, designer of algorithms, or if I just don't care, or if, whatever the case may be, there's nothing that's going to stop me from producing biased algorithms. I can easily do that. And I think that is the problem that we face right now, is that unless we have some sort of external guardrails that are going to be guarding against, whether it's sort of, people that don't care enough to fix their algorithms, or people that, might actually not feel that some bias is not a bad thing, which again, we don't believe that, but there could be others out there. I think that's really where the problem lies. It's that it's all a self-monitored system.
Absolutely. And do you think that this technology is sort of changing human mindsets, rather than the opposite?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that you asked that. I think, I think especially now in the current pandemic situation, I think people are becoming more aware of the positive potential of technology. I mean, think about it, right? I don't know about you, but I'm working from home. I've been working from home now for a month. We're obviously lucky that our jobs can be done using Zoom and everything else. And, we're fortunate. However, I think it's showing people that, technology does have challenges, and we should be aware of those challenges, but it's not inherently bad. Like right now, it's being an aid. It's helping us all sort of come through this pandemic, hopefully in a better situation than if we hadn't had technology. So I don't know that AI is fundamentally changing humans. It could well. And I think that once somebody sees the power of well-designed artificial intelligence to remove bias, I think that's a hugely powerful experience. I mean, I'll give you my first experience that I had with it. So we were working with a well-known CPG company, and they had started using biometrics for campus recruiting. And, prior to that, they were going to maybe, this is in the US, they were going to maybe 15 schools, and they were all top schools and, elite universities and whatnot, right? And then they started using biometrics, and then anyone who went to any university could apply, which was really sort of, revolutionary, groundbreaking. And that is really the case. That is how things should be, but that's not often the way things are, right? And then the thing that was really sort of mind-blowing to me is that, they hired from this, they went from going to 15 schools to basically 2,500, right, overnight. So that in and of itself is amazing. But then the people they hired were just as likely to come from a, sort of whatever college than an elite one. And what was really kind of mind-blowing was that the applicants they selected to become their interns were so socioeconomically disadvantaged that they didn't have enough money to fly on a plane. They didn't have enough money to rent an apartment and, come fly across country. And that was really, startling to the company because they had never had that experience. And then that just shows you the pool that you're picking from, right? Because if historically you've never had an applicant say to you, hey, I need to, have a relocation policy up front that allows me to get this, these funds to come and live in a different city for the summer, it just sort of tells you the sort of very narrow demographic of people that you're selecting from. And that to me was really sort of earth-shattering, because it was like, wow, in literally overnight, we can change the type of person that's having access to a really good job at a really good company. And that was what, has kept me going all this time, despite all of the controversies around AI and, and all the rest of it. I think it's stories like that I find just, really heartwarming. So.
Wow, that is amazing. And I think, after the pandemic is over, we're going to need more of these tools to actually decide to remove the bias, right? And
yeah, absolutely.
Do you still I'm sure you do a lot of research. Do you still come across biases that are still unknown and you keep discovering these again and again?
Well, I mean, I think that the bias I just spoke about there, socioeconomic bias, is something that people don't even talk about as much. Like we're very comfortable talking about gender bias and ethnic bias. We don't really talk about socioeconomic bias, right? We don't talk about how our entire sort of, civilization or, is structured to, essentially allow privileged people to get better jobs than people that are not privileged, right? And, look, I'm a beneficiary of, like elite schools and whatnot. And yes, they have great education, and I'm not saying we should throw them out. I'm just saying that right now, the way we've structured society, it should come as no surprise that socioeconomic inequality is as bad as it is, because again, really prestigious companies continue to select from elite colleges. And again, if you keep having that strategy, of course, this problem is never going to get better, right? And again, yes, there's merit to getting into a top university, but at least in the United States, you are 77 times more likely to go to a top school if you come from the top 1% of the population from a socioeconomic perspective than if you come from the bottom 20%. That's just outrageous, right? I mean, yes, SAT scores and grades have something to do with it, but obviously there's a question of, the privilege of your background, right? So I think it's these types of things that I think are exposed by AI that in a way that I think hopefully will help us change the future in ways that will guard against and fight against these types of biases.
Absolutely. I think it will bring about a revolution for sure, And
yeah, the other thing I just wanted to mention is I think, one of the things that I think is really critical in realizing the potential of artificial intelligence and technology in general is that, right now, because of COVID, we are going through one of the biggest reallocations of labor that's ever happened, since sort of World War II. And we can't rely on these manual, slow, non-tech enabled processes to help all of these people who literally overnight, right, became unemployed, right? It had nothing to do with how well they were doing their job. It had nothing to do with their skill or anything. It just literally had to do with, hey, your operation has been shut and you now no longer have a job. And so what we see technologists doing, and we're one of those technologies, we actually are building a redeployment platform that can take all of these people that have suddenly been put out of work, capture both their skill, their hard skills, as well as their soft skills, so their social, emotional, and cognitive attributes, and help them immediately understand what are the jobs that I could be well suited for, and then connect them directly to companies. That doesn't exist right now. You know what I mean? Yes, there are platforms like Indeed and LinkedIn that are sort of job boards, but there's no platform right now that can really efficiently match talent in that way. And I'm hopeful that we can take a very crappy situation like COVID and take a technology solution like that and really showcase what could be done at scale. I mean, this should be happening everywhere, and it should be happening now. And that's what we're trying to show, is that, this resistance to using technology and hiring is really hurting a lot of people. You know what I mean? And it's not necessary. It's really our own human resistance to it that is getting in the way, I think. So.
Absolutely. And let's be honest, the recruitment system it's just not
It's terrible.
up there. Yeah.
It's terrible, right? I mean, like, I think it's, 83% of people have a bad experience. 50% of people never hear back from a company. I mean, people that think it's working haven't applied for a job in the last 5 or 10 years. I mean, that's what, it's like anyone who thinks it's a humane process that's being done by humans has never experienced the resume black hole. And I think it's unfortunate because I think sometimes, like, some heads of recruiting are, like they're my age, I'm 47, but they haven't been through a recruiting process, in the last 20 years. And so they may not be aware of just how demoralizing and discouraging it can be. And I think that's where I benefited from, sort of being a career changer in my 30s and actually witnessing, wow, this is really bad. And it hasn't changed at all since I was in college. And what can we do about this? Because I think it was a very eye-opening experience as to how bad it was. And again, this was at Harvard Business School, where people have a tremendous number of options. So if it's bad there, I can only imagine what it's like in the rest of the world. You know what I mean? So.
Absolutely. And I think we also have data that, we see candidate feedback is much better if they actually interact with technology, like, let's say chatbots in a very crude way, right? So we have data to support what you're saying. So I think it's important for, people to start adopting it and have a broader mindset.
Totally. I mean, I think at the end of the day, what I always say is, like, a person wants a job. That is what they want when they're, it's just like dating. When you go on a dating app, the main thing you want to do is find your person. Well, many people, not all, but most people are there to find a partner, right? And it's the same with jobs. Like, you are there to find your next best fit job. There are many things that you'll forgive so long as the end outcome is that I am matched with a job that I like as quickly as possible, right? And I think that's what we always need to keep in mind when we're building these systems. And actually, I mean, again, just a little plug for Pymetrics is that if someone is asked to go through Pymetrics for recruitment experience and they are, for whatever reason, not matched to the job they applied, we will first evaluate them for other jobs at the company, and then we will evaluate them for other jobs outside of the company, right? So the whole system is built around how can we maximize the chance that someone who's using Pymetrics, going through Pymetrics, actually gets a job. And I think all systems should be built that way. You know what I mean? Right now, they're not built with the career seeker in mind. They're built with other people in mind, which is fine. I get it. Like, companies have to use them, but there's no downside. In fact, there's a lot of upside, I think, to putting the candidate first and saying, what would I like to see in the system as a candidate? And how can I make it be candidate friendly, candidate empowering? I think, that's how we should be building these systems.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I think we never really go to candidates to ask them what is it that they want from systems,
Well, Pymetrics does, actually. We have a candidate advisory council, which is fantastic, and we've actually gotten direct feedback. And look, I mean, everybody, it's dating is a good example. Dating, there are lots of not fun parts of dating. You have to go on a lot of dates before you find your person, right? So it's not that every aspect of a job will be fun or seem enjoyable or, there's obviously a lot of anxiety, but that's, even given that background, what can we do to improve things for candidates?
Absolutely. It's like how they say it's matchmaking. Pymetrics helps you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you talk about using cognitive science, and for you, resume is like the cover of a book, right? So, how exactly do you go about using cognitive science to help with candidates?
Yeah. So we use, I like to think of it broadly as behavioral science, because it's not just cognitive science, but basically what we try to do is use, we call them games, but essentially they are computer activities that were designed by scientists. So all of the tools that we use are well-known scientific exercises that look at things like memory, planning, attention, sequencing, altruism, reward profile, risk profile, and so on. They were all developed by scientists, and we just took them and used them to understand things that are more fundamental about people, right? Because, I mean, a resume, it's fine. There's potentially a few useful things on there, more useful potentially as you go along. But even then, I think it's very limited, because all it tells you is the very narrow slice of life that I have done, right? I mean, you're a human being. You chose a particular career. you could have chosen many other careers. You might have been just as successful at all those careers. All a resume tells you is like this very narrow sliver of experience that I have. It tells you nothing about the potential that I do have for other jobs. And it certainly doesn't tell you anything about a person's soft skills, right? And that's what we learned at HBS was when we were interviewing recruiters and hiring managers, we would say, well, what are you trying to get from a resume in an interview? What is it that you're trying to understand? And they would tell us all these things that they wanted to understand about a person. And they're all essentially soft skills, right? They're not hard skills. They're not like, can you code in this language or have you ever done a sales job before? It's all about the soft skills of a person. So those are the types of things that we try to measure, that we think that we measure using the biometric system. And the other thing that I think is really important for us to understand is that, and again, this is the way our system works, and we strongly believe in this. Ours is what we call a fit-based system. That means there's no aptitude that we measure that is always good, and there's no aptitude that is always bad. That is not the true in other systems, but what we believe is that everything we measure could be adaptive or not adaptive, just depending on the role, right? And let's take attention to detail. If you are very attentive to detail, that means you make a great accountant. It means you make a terrible salesperson. Salespeople tend to be a little inattentive to detail because being inattentive to detail makes you more creative and makes you more novelty seeking, which is probably what you need to be when you're a salesperson, but not an accountant, right? And that's just one example of the many things that we measure that could be good either end of the spectrum. I think that's critical because I think, again, using a resume, what we have created is a hiring process that assumes that people that have this on their resume are all good, and then people that don't have that are not as good, right? And how many blogs or articles have you seen out there? Here are the 5 things you need to put on your resume to get the job, or like even really offensive things like how to whiten your resume for people that are not Caucasian, which I think is awful, right? But the point is, I think the resume-based system has created this notion of hiring that there's the haves and the have-nots, right? And again, we want to just blow that out of the water. There is no such thing. Everybody has a fit. It doesn't matter who you are. You have not only one fit, but multiple fits. I think it's so ridiculous, quite frankly, to think that everybody doesn't have a role in the place of work. I just think that's absurd, And I think that we need to move away from this resume pedigree-based system where, Harvard students are wonderful and anyone that didn't go to Harvard is not wonderful, and just create a fit-based system where whoever you are, wherever you come from, you have many things you can do in life that you will do well and really increase the chances that someone matches to those opportunities.
So it's just trying to read between the lines and finding out, attitude versus aptitude.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I'm going to use a dating analogy again, which is, I think, 50 years ago, 70 years ago, maybe the message that was given to people was you had to be a certain profile of person to find your best person, right? And it was like sort of a very cookie cutter, like, I don't know, for women, maybe it was that, you had to, I don't know, do your hair well and cook well. I don't know, I'm just making it up, right? Whereas now, no one would ever, hopefully, say to anybody that that's what they should do. It would be like, hey, just be whoever you are, be warts and all, be whoever your true self is, and that's how you're going to find your perfect partner. I think there's much more of that message in sort of the area of relationships. Well, I think we need that same message for work. I think we have to stop thinking that there's one type of person that is going to be good at many things. I mean, whenever I hear the word talent war, I'm like, why are you all fighting over the same people? That's just silly, right? And instead, it should be really about matching people to the right role. And again, I saw this firsthand at HBS. Like, there were all these talented Harvard students who thought they wanted to be investment bankers, let's say, right? Even though their friends were like, but you like 15 hours of sleep a night. Why do you think you want to be an investment banker? But they're like, no, I want to be an investment banker. And then, they were smart and they're Harvard students, so they get the internship. And then 3 days in, they'd be like, I hate my life. This is a terrible job for me. And you're like, okay, but that's my point, right? Is that you're not good at everything. And companies shouldn't assume that just because somebody has a degree from a fancy school that they're going to be good at everything. So let's forget about that notion. Let's assume that everybody has fits and that it's all about trying to help people find their best fits.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. And it's very bold that you're actually diving into the gray of this area and trying to make sense of it, because this is something nobody wants to, put their hands in it, and because this is like probably dirty work and just too much of a headache. And that's amazing. You're actually trying to make an effort there. And this is a question that I have. when you're trying to assess a candidate, right, there are a lot of good characteristics and a lot of bad ones as well. So is technology able to, make sense of such characteristics that might actually be harmful, or something that's happened in their background that might, want to be heard?
Well, can you be more specific? Because be more specific. Like, what do you mean?
So let's say if there
What
is
bad characteristics?
yeah, so if there is like a candidate who's done something in the past, right, that they are not willing to put it up front, so their background is a little flawed, or there's something negative that they've done, right? And when you do assessments and tools, they're all fine. The aptitude is good, attitude also looks good.
Right.
But I don't know about background validation, so something around that.
Yeah. So again, if you're talking about sort of strictly things that would come up on a background check, that's not something that we deal in. Again, mostly so I guess for a variety of reasons. I think yes, those instances do happen, and obviously, someone should be truthful about their background for sure. However, I think understanding the potential someone has is more important, quite frankly, than whether they've made a mistake in the past or not. And I really think that's what we try to focus on. I mean, so again, I'm going to go off on a teeny bit of a tangent, but I was watching this Ken Burns documentary about prisoners who then end up getting a bachelor's degree in prison, right? And really the amazing things that they can go on to do. So even someone who has committed a serious crime and is behind bars, once that time is over, even they, I think, should be given, a chance. Now, again, we should be honest about our backgrounds, no matter what those are, even if it's hard to be honest. So I'm not advocating for cheating or lying or anything like that. However, I do think that the potential for human beings to do great things is far greater than their flaws, and I guess I'll just leave it at that. So,
Interesting. Thank you for that answer.
You're welcome.
And what's your opinion on having like a human capital management platform to increase employee engagement?
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I mean, I think there's so many tools out there now that help increase engagement. There are tons of platforms out there now to do that, and I think it's so wonderful to get real-time feedback about what's happening in an organization and how, if people are happy, if they're not happy. I mean, I think that's fantastic, right? It doesn't mean, again, that you're going to bypass human-to-human interaction. It's just that there's a quick way, easy way, and we're all online. We're all using apps all the time. Why wouldn't we use them to find out more about how our workforce is thinking and what our workforce wants? I think they're fantastic tools. We should avail ourselves of them.
Absolutely. And with so many tools like yours, and then there's Humo, and there's so many more, right? Yeah. What do you think is the future of work? Where is it all heading towards?
I don't know that I had an answer for that before the pandemic hit, and now I feel like it's even more, kind of like an open question. But for me, I think that work. So again, the pandemic has been horrible. It has hurt many people. It has caused so much chaos and strife and everything. I think a few of the good things that, in my mind, have come out of it is it's just showing how resilient people are, that we literally transitioned from a digital workforce overnight, and we just did it like that, right? Like nobody thought twice about like, okay, now I'm gonna my bedroom. You can't see my background, but there's a bed behind there. My bedroom is now my office. My child might run into my office at any point. Like, I mean, just the fact that we were so resilient. And I think the second thing is that it just goes to show that, do we even need an office to be productive? Do we need, all these things? I mean, work is about finding something that you care enough about, that you're willing to commit, 40 hours a week or more to this goal, right? And so I think a lot of the trappings of a job, whether it's an office or a suit or a commute or flying on an airplane all the time, all those things are not really what a job is about. A job is about the fundamental work that you're doing, and honestly, the mission and the purpose of what you're doing in the world, what you think you're achieving in the longer term. That's really what a job should be about, not all this other stuff. I think, like a desk and an office and a suit and airplane travel. Those are not what a job should be about, in my opinion. And I think the pandemic has helped us realize that to some extent. So I don't know if that's going to be the future of work. I hope that that's a direction that we continue to go in, because I think that's far more truthful and far more optimistic about work than sort of all these other trappings, I would say, of what a job entails.
Yeah, absolutely love your optimism. And I think if you can be productive even from, being at home, then why not? It's just so simpler, and it's good for the environment as well.
Totally. It's good for the environment. It's good for people that aren't, I mean, honestly, it's good for women because they don't have to, it's good for people that have disabilities because, obviously sometimes more traditional work environments are challenging. It's good for so many people. You know what I mean? I'm not saying, look, obviously there's a downside to everything, but I think the more flexibility we can offer people to do the kind of work that they are passionate about, wherever they want to do that work, I think that's really the way of the future. So hopefully we can all embrace that.
So how do you think, millennials they have a different mindset than, let's say, baby boomers, or let's say even Gen Z. So do you think there is a way to kind of unify them in their mindsets? And do you think that technology can actually remove that bias, that mindset bias?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And again, I mean, maybe it's because, so you wouldn't know this about me, but I am half Italian. I was born in Italy. And part of the reason they think COVID hit Italy so badly is because there's a lot of mixing of the generations, right? And I would say that in Europe in general, that's true, is that there's far more mixing of young people, middle-aged people, old people, and there isn't this sort of, I'm only going to hang out with my generation. And I think that, I think you can bring that anywhere. I think you can learn so much from any generation. And and again, so long as we recognize as a generation what our tendencies are, right? So if you're Gen Z, it's this. If you're a millennial, it's that. I think, again, it's another type of bias that I think we should try to eliminate because, in my opinion, diversity of all types is really what creates better solutions. So,
yeah, absolutely. I think inclusion is the way to go.
Yeah, totally. Yep. And I think, inclusion is something that doesn't come naturally because inclusion means I have to be okay with someone being very different than me, right? And again, it's not that we're not good people. It's that if somebody is more similar to you, it's easier to get along with them or, find commonality. But the whole point of inclusion is that, no, I have to, the whole point is I need to stretch myself. I need to stretch myself to be to develop comfort with people that are very different than me in certain ways. And it doesn't come naturally. I think we have to just be honest and say it doesn't come naturally. However, I think there's real benefit that people can see from that. I'm one of these people that I don't personally like a lot of homogeneity. If I go somewhere and it's all a bunch of people that look just like me, it feels quite boring, I think. However, with finding a more diverse group of people, there is friction, just because not everyone thinks like me, not everyone talks like me, not everyone has the same background. So I think just realizing that, but just realizing the value and the beauty of it is super important.
Absolutely. I think it just takes a little compromise, and then you realize so much more.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And I'm just going to wrap this up by asking if you have any other important sound bites that you'd like to leave for our viewers.
No, I don't have any important sound bites. I just, I would encourage everyone to just think of, I guess I am definitely a glass half full kind of person. And I think that, even in really troubled times, it really is incumbent upon us to retain hope and see what is the positive, what can I do, what's the contribution I can make to making the world a better place, even when it's not easy to think that way. So that's the thing that I would leave everyone with in these times of trouble. And, just always think there are people out there that are far worse off than we are. And that those are the people that we should be striving to make a better world for.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you, Frida. I had a lot of fun. It was really high energy. So I really appreciate your time and you sharing.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Yep. Take care. Bye.